Welcome to IXDD World Interaction Design Day. Establish this context. This is a event. It's an annual event hosted by Adobe and Interaction Design community to bring in the global community of interaction designers all together and to connect and see how they can develop more innovative solutions, learn from each other. So for this year, the our title is the topic we wanted to discuss was digital transformation and the next step for employment and sustainability. Get this topic, the whole theme was culture and sustainability, and we thought what is better topic than this one where we take education and how it is going into a certain change with the whole digitalization and how we can create like take this transformation and create more sustainable employment opportunities. So for today's panel we have three prominent figures. We have Pratima Inalu, the Chief Design Officer of Devami Design Labs. She's has more than 10 years of experience creating crafting experiences and creating innovative solutions for various industries and businesses. Her focus is to create value adding solutions. Then we have Yashwant. He's the chief executive at Advisely, and in a past career he uses data science skills with global airlines to help them create better solutions. Now he's concentrating on modeling human learning and accelerating it with personalization. So he leads Advisely, which is a AI driven hybrid learning platform for learning and career platform for engineering students that collaborates with different colleges and brings them engineering, like all the knowledge for engineering subjects at their fingertips. And we have Mrs. Sushila Kanduri. She's the principal at Avinash College of Commerce, Hyderabad. They have 4 campuses. They offer more than 25 courses from junior colleges to degree. So their aim is to get commerce, business, and professional education under one roof and creating like catering to emerging educational needs of the country. So we have these three panelists from different era streams. One, we have education provider, one who's emerging and very popular education technologist, and we have the design team, right? So I'll hand over this to Pratima to take it ahead.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks for the introductions. Mrs. Shushila and Yash, thank you so much for attending this. This will give a great insight to all the designers out there who are attending this design session. And I'm sure there are a few more, entrepreneurs and people who are working in EduTech that might be joining us or must have joined us already. So let me actually if even before I start bombarding you with questions or starting off the discussions, Mrs. Shushila, if you would like to introduce yourself or throw some more light than what Amit did, that will be great. I mean, we'd like to know your journey. I'm sure it has been a wonderful journey over the past few years, or long career.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think what he said was enough, but just to add, I love this journey because it keeps me young. I'm in the higher education essentially. So that's one thing that I would love most about the profession that I'm doing. I've been a professor. I'm still a professor, but being the principal, administrative duties takes me a little while away from teaching, but I'm a very passionate teacher. And of course, a commerce professor. So I'm not naming the papers that I would deal with. Apart from being an academician for the last 28 years, I also happens to be a young adult counselor. I'm into counseling, emotional and mental health counseling. And combining my profession, I have specialized in young adult counseling. So that I think is a good combination to be a good teacher and probably connect with the students and help students if the situation arises. I think that should suffice as an introduction about myself. I'm glad, of course, as she was mentioning a little while earlier, it was a short notice, but as I said, I think there's a lot of debate and discussion required around this area. We are sailing through, but I don't know. I think by force we are sailing through. I think we must be a little more comfortable in sailing through. So probably platforms like this would enable all of us to be a little more equipped in terms of being able to sail smoothly rather than, sail with the wind. Now we are precisely doing with the wind. I wish that we would come to a point where we would have a smooth sail. Thank you. Thank you, Pratima.
Thanks so much, Ms. Sheila. Yes, you want to introduce yourself? Throw some light on what you're doing and.
Yeah, sure, Pratima. First of all, thanks a lot for inviting me to this. I think it's super awesome to be here with you talking again, and with Sushila ma'am and the rest of the team that's joined us this evening. So I come from a completely technology background. I studied computer science from IIT Madras. This was about 8 years back when I passed out of IIT. One of the key things that I remember from my days in IIT was this old professor. His name is RKK. We used to call him RKK. His name is Kalyana Krishnan. He used to give us a very simple program, like a very, very straightforward program, like reversing a string. That's a very standard program that they teach in engineering colleges. And we used to literally spend close to 3 months. It's a 4-month semester, and we used to spend 3 months on just that one problem, right? And it was so the reason why we had to spend so much time is because he was really persistent on figuring out how the user would react to our program. So he used to ask us to make it as empathetic as possible, really figure out how the user is going to look at what we are doing. And it used to really piss off everyone used to get pissed off. We are all like the top 200 rankers of IIT JEE, and then you give a very simple program. It was borderline insulting to most of us, saying we cannot be spending 3 months on this. But at the end of the day, it taught us a very, very important lesson on really empathizing about whom you are building products for. And to be very honest, I haven't built as many products as I would want to. But in whatever I have built in my experience, it took a lot of time to actually realize what the users want. And now we are bombarded with so many tools day in, day out. Some of them are exceptionally good, exceptionally smooth, while some of them are such a pain to use. While the idea is fantastic, it just shows that not enough thought went into it. So, that's my passion area, and that's why I share a lot of good rapport with Pratima and the rest of the Divamya team, because there are a lot of discussions about why some things work and why some things don't work. Why is there a friction point in some places? And I run an edutech company for engineering students. And the reason, honestly, why I chose engineering students rather than K-12 or the younger set of students is because higher education and students of that age are much easier to handle. And I can really understand what they are going through. If somebody is building a problem for class 6 student, then I have no clue how that works. It's so massively difficult. While there are so many platforms that address, or they say that they claim to address their needs in the 6th class or until 8th standard, I think it's a different ball game altogether, and I am not good at it. I am comfortable with the young adults, and that's where we started off with. And we are doing reasonably good. We have a bunch of colleges who are actively using our platform, and there are a lot of things that we changed in the last few months in making it more usable for both students as well as faculty. And there's a huge difference, right? Faculty members are from a different mindset altogether when compared to students, and it's really difficult to balance out both of them. So there are a bunch of learnings that happened, very accelerated learning for ourselves in the last few months when we were building products for this kind of a demographic. So yeah, once again, I think it's great to be on this session. IXDD and Team Divamya, thanks a lot for inviting me.
So yes, actually, you took me back to my college days. I still remember seeing the floppy disk for the first time. I got it as a gift from one of my friends for my birthday, and the excitement that I had in my eyes, and it was it. It was undescribable, right? I still remember that. I mean, that memory is still in my head. And we still remember how we used to treat the desktops in our lab. We had to handle the keys with such care. We had to wipe it. I mean, they were like gods to us at that point. From there to, the journey of technology, from there to seeing my children just throw the phones or iPads or, carelessly on the beds or wherever, right? It's we have evolved so much there. Let's not keep the audience waiting. So I'll get to the first question. Mrs. Sushila, this is for you.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to educational institutions, right? The world before March and after March, they just seem to be parallel worlds, right? What, according to you, is the most difficult transition from pre-COVID to post-COVID in the education sector? And if you can throw some insights and your journey in the last 6 months, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I wouldn't draw a parallel, but I would say it's been devastating, if it's inappropriate to use that word. There are two things I would like to mention here, which made which created a huge impact. Number one is the timing the pandemic struck in India, for example, in the whole world, but specifically in India, in the education sector. And the second would be the digital inequality which we had in the country. These two probably would be what I would like to mention here. The timing, when I mentioned the word timing, what I meant was normally our curriculum runs from summer to summer. Most of the institutions, whether it is schooling or higher education institutions, the session begins somewhere in June, July, and we tend to end it by March, April. And all of us know, I mean, while all of you are talking, I think I am the senior most person in age in the whole group. So it took me back to my times too, as much as I could recall and remember. The momentum picks up from January into the examination mode in all the children who are into the year-wise system. And semester-wise, it's no different. We are just a month behind the year-wise system. So technically speaking, Feb, March would be the peak period psychologically for students, and more so in India with the parents, more than students today. The parents are having so much of anxiety with the children's exams. So with both the sects of people, that was an essential time. And this was one, come 21st March, 22nd March, it was like a total collapse of the structure. So that was one very devastating thing which happened. The timing was wrong. I wouldn't say that the pandemic wouldn't have hit us any better if it was any other time. But for education system, keeping that in mind, I think the timing was very bad. There were a lot of issues, psychological issues amongst children, amongst parents, amongst teachers, amongst education institutions as to how to counter this. There was a total collapse of the mental stability that a lot of students had built up. There was anxiety among students because the preparation went in vain. And we know we are a nation of marks, we are a nation of rankers. All right, so in that environment, I think people who are very badly hit must be the students psychologically. That's one. Having said that, if you look at the national context, the digital inequality is something which probably had made a lot of difference. Initially, there was a lot of confusion in the education sector, but I think we gathered our wits. Second week of April, probably the education institutions are back on their feet, trying to figure out what best can be done, how best we can move forward, how can we reach the children, how best can this problem be resolved. So each one is finding their own ways and means. But at that time, the second thing which hit was the digital inequality. Forget about the rural and the urban divide. I'm just mentioning even the faculty, most of them are not equipped with the smartphones. The children are, the faculty are not. So this is another facet which is a very great challenge compared to pre and post COVID times. Now, apart from this, coping with the technology, I would put it as a third. Coping with the technology, but of course, why I'm putting it as a third, I have a very valid reason. We could help them adapt. Somehow we had that kind of time to help them adapt, if not completely. Whatever was required, the skill sets required could be imparted. But the first two, the timing and digital inequality, must be the greatest factors, which very negatively impacted the student community as well as the education sector.
How did parents react, ma'am, during all this?
Parents, as I said, parent reaction and the child reaction, I would put it on the same platform during the exam time. Both have equal anxiety levels. And that's what I mentioned. Parents are even more anxious than the student about their marks and other things. This is specific only to the Indian subcontinent. But the uncertainty is in terms of, whether it would be a 0 year. I found most of the parents calling up saying, what would happen to my child's education? Because I think there are two institutions which are compulsory in India. One is everybody must have their children educated. So education is one and marriage is the second one. So we cannot get rid of these two institutions. I often find telling myself to a student, when the child absolutely refuses to study, I'm in higher education. So when a college student says, I don't want to study, I have parents who almost faint there, saying that, how is he born like this? How can it be? I said, what's wrong? If he doesn't want to educate himself, he doesn't want to educate himself. Let him be. I mean, education is not the end of it. I should not say this as an academician, but there are several other ways of living. All right. So with that kind of psychology, with that psyche and mentality amongst the parents, the first question is, what would happen? Would my child lose a year of education? Is the first question. All right. I would rather a parent must have probably worried about the social isolation, being away from the peer groups, being away from the classrooms, and it's fun. Unfortunately, I found most of the parents getting gripped with this fear of what happens to the 1 year education. Is my son going to take 4 years to complete his graduation? Will he be doing will he get into his employment a year later? Or would there be employment? Would the world come to an end without being completely, a graduate called a graduate? They're not worried about the world ending. They're worried about the world ending without his son graduating. So sorry for saying this. I'm a parent too, but this is what the parent put forward. All right. Now it's a lot more different. I'm talking about the first 2 months of the pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am. Actually, my son is in 10th and he goes to a Waldorf school where technology was hardly used. I mean, they discouraged technology.
Absolutely.
And in the last 6 months, the amount of technology that they've been using has skyrocketed. I mean, I don't even know. They're all over the place. Yeah. I did have those fears because 10 definitely mattered. And not probably, one of the other things is probably I personally didn't have any pressure on myself nor the child, but then I know that the society will look at him in a certain way.
Yeah.
And he needs to, so there is always this thing that I keep telling him, there is education and then there is exams. There are two different things in my head. For exams, you need to do certain things. For educating yourself, for learning, you need to do certain things. So, somehow we all have to take that together. Otherwise, it's very hard to be successful in the society. So, yeah.
And let me add one more thing here. Now, I'm talking about the 6th or the 7th month of COVID that we are into. Now that you just mentioned that your son or your child has been in the 10th, I didn't recall if it's a daughter or a son, but a son who's in the 10th standard. We realize that most of the governments have been magnanimous enough to let the exams go by and promote them. Now the children are facing a new set of issue because they are branded as the COVID batch.
Yeah.
So quite often I find students who are especially in the 6th semester in the normal graduation and probably the 8th semester if it's an engineering graduate, coming forward through our counseling sessions and asking if it really matters, if the employer would be, looking at them with a different perspective. And added to that, what kind of jokes are around in the WhatsApp, the COVID batch doing things wrong. So that jokes apart, this is going to be a very big scar in the minds of these youngsters who are just getting out of their colleges and then getting into employment. All right. Now, 7 semesters he would have done perfectly, but 8th semester government promoting them without an exam probably leaves a very, very bad impact on his understanding or how the world is going to accept him or look at him. All right. Yeah. So that's going to be a great challenge for this generation, in spite of the government's magnanimity. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. So, yes, this is for you. We will shift a bit from teachers and moms talking. So, so I know you're, you with great passion you started Advisely, and Advisely's primary focus is to bridge the gap between education and employment, right? And that's where we just ended the discussion, the earlier discussion. So what is your vision, and how are you planning to do that? And has COVID helped you, or what has COVID, what kind of impact does COVID has on your business, or the vision and mission of Advisely?
So while starting Advisely, I was evaluating a bunch of ideas, and most of them were related to education. And there is a reason why we chose an edu technology rather than setting up a more. I believe that the learning has to happen in social groups, and we need to have people together to learn. I think the webinar itself is an example of that, right? We are together in a group to learn from each other. It's not that you have a piece of paper on which everything can be written and you can simply absorb. There needs to be this discussion and dialogue, and you need to hear the other side of things to learn, learn more holistically. So when I was evaluating these ideas, I realized that there are 2 powerful forces that is shaping the world today, right? One is the force of globalization. The other is the force of automation, right? No matter what, this is going to get stronger and stronger as we keep progressing into future. And these 2 forces are going to define the future. The opposing force to globalization and automation is basically employment. You don't want people to lose jobs because of globalization. You don't want jobs to shift from one country to the other, completely devastating one economy. You don't want automation and robots to take over and more people getting lost, more people losing their jobs. So at the end of the day, employment is again related to education. And that's why I think a lot of developed countries as well as large companies have keenly started looking at education as a problem solver for employment. So that's where the whole force, and that's where I think most of the investment is going today. To enable education at scale, I think technology is the only way, and that's where the whole, my thought process of building an edutech platform started. And technology makes it scalable. You can replicate it at near zero cost. In spite of the rural divide, in spite of a lot of other things, there can be percolation to the roots and to the nooks and corners of any country, or in fact the whole planet. So that's the whole large level picture of why we started off with this. Clearly, like Sushila ma'am was pointing out, there's a huge digital divide. Not everyone is equipped with the right kind of resources, be it the hardware that is required for accessing this technology, or the thought process and the preparedness to handle new technology and learn from a technology platform. During COVID, what we have seen is that has been a lot of adoption, right? Across the board, everyone started asking for a solution that can solve their problem, that can make things remote, that can enable students to continue what they are doing, keep up the momentum. Again, March was a very critical time period in the duration of an academic year, and they didn't want to lose out on the momentum and continue with their learning processes. So that shift has definitely happened. Until March, probably, while we had to go and educate colleges, educate faculty members, and to an extent educate students as well about the importance of a tool that can be their personal companion in their learning, make them more employable, get them ready for placements, get them ready for their exams, and so on and so forth. During COVID, I think large number of people basically realize that the world is going to go digital when it comes to even learning. Technology is, penetration of technology in education institutes has seen a lot of resistance, not just in India, I think across the world. You don't hear about a lot of technology being used in colleges, even in the MITs and CMUs and Harvards of the world. There is still a lot of it. If you look at even the best professors who won Nobel Prize, they still teach on a on a board. They hold a chalk piece. There is no slides, right? There is that whole flow of way things are explained, and then you have this aha moment when two dots are connected by the professor, and you're like, okay, this is why he got a Nobel Prize. I mean, I had the honor of listening to such people in my life, and I really felt, okay, there are perspectives that are not really captured in a textbook. Probably there is one textbook somewhere that I must have not read, but still, I think when you're with a person, the learning that can happen is at a very higher order that today's technology is still not there. And it's true for a lot of things. I was listening to Eric Yuan, the guy behind Zoom, and he talks about how the future of conferencing in general, not just video, is going to be combining smell and touch and a lot of other facets that we can't even imagine right now. So I think learning or teaching are on a similar trajectory. They are also kind of in the transformation phase. What COVID has done is that it has decreased the timelines by at least 5 years. If not for COVID, I don't imagine colleges to be adopting technology, schools to be adopting technology at the level which it's doing right now, right? So at the end of the day, it's been an accelerator. But I come from a point of view that eventually the converging point would have been the same. If not today, if not COVID, another pandemic, if not a pandemic, a government regulation, something would have changed. Some economics would have come into picture because you wanted to create cheaper education. You wanted to create large scale education systems that people in every nook and corner of the country and of the world can have access to. So it's an eventuality, if you ask me, but COVID kind of accelerated the whole process.
I mean, that is so true. When I started working was when Google was getting popular, and actually when I was doing my master's was when Google was getting popular. And I was the first few of those who would go to Google whenever I had a question rather than go to a library and refer. This was during my final year of master's. And I still remember my family saying, Google does not know anything. You still have to go back to your professors. You still have to go back to the library. It's an interesting evolution there. But yeah, back to your point, Yash, where you rightly pointed out, as much as we like the EduTech tools, as much as we are getting exposure to a lot more topics, I mean, children or students these days have access to literally anything. I mean, if they want to learn something, they do have access to it. They can go figure it out. They can learn it. This was not the case 20 years back. Things are definitely changing, but there is a different perspective, like you rightly pointed out, right? Sometimes our favorite subjects or favorite teachers, they really matter in our lives. It is quite possible a lot of us would have picked a certain subject in our higher education, or would have picked a career option only because the way the subject was taught and our passion towards that subject. Some of us, yeah, we were brainwashed to either take engineering or medicine, end of the day. But if given a choice, some of us, when we look back, we picked subjects of passion, right? So in that context, ma'am, I mean, there are so many memories that I have of my college days, right? I mean, yes, there was stress of exams, there was a lot going on, but then, there was a lot of musty happening as well. And that mattered. That made me who I am today. It be it my communication, be it my team play, or whatever it is, right? As a person, my friends, my environment, they all did contribute to who I am and what I am today, right? So in this COVID situation where children are attending classes from home, and their interactivity with other students is again through technology. It's limited to technology. Are there any specific measures you're taking to increase the group interactivity, or to simulate the environment that we would have normally had? Ma'am, you're on mute.
Yeah, specifically with regard to higher education, I think we're trying to adapt faster because we understand that social learning process is all the more required before these children are, onboarded to the employability aspect. So it took a while, but I think we're all on the right path for creating them online platforms to interact with each other. For example, one of the popular pedagogy of teaching in the higher learning, especially in commerce and management, is the case study method of teaching. I'm just giving you one example for you to understand that it's a group activity in a simulated environment, which students thoroughly enjoy because it gives a scope for a lot of creativity along with fun component, which all of us experienced in the classroom. So that kind of activity, we are able to do it today thanks to the virtual discussion rooms provided on various platforms. Initially, we were groping. All of us were a little bit worried about the isolation that the student would feel. And unfortunately, because of the broadband issues, I don't know if I'm using the correct technical terms. I'm not a techie, so please pardon me if I'm using the wrong context. But we could not, we had to ask them to shut their videos with the fear of diluting the voice connectivity. So we had no human touch. We had students, we could not provide any social interaction. But once we got acquainted to the systems, once, like Mr. Yashwant was indicating, there are various platforms which responded to us, started creating these small virtual discussion rooms for the students. I think they are feeling a lot more better now. Only thing is maybe they miss the touch, the smell, the feel of hugging somebody, holding somebody's hand, nudging somebody, pushing, shoveling. This is a part of the fun activity which probably they're missing. But I think more or less, I could say that given the circumstances, these virtual discussion rooms have proved to be the best substitute in the given circumstances. I think it's really helping, at least the platform onto which we are operating in the college for which I'm working. I think Zoom also provides these virtual discussion rooms, if I'm right. So I think they're slowly adapting. I think we have no alternative now but to get into this mode.
Yeah. I mean,
anyway, having said this, I think here, let me get back to the digital divide. I think urban children are better off.
Yes.
In their social interactions, because by the time the pandemic struck, most of the urban children are onto the social networking. So that way for the urban children, it didn't really matter much, but it's been very horrifying experiences for the rural children who probably are not on any social networking site. I think isolation must have struck them very badly compared to the urban children. And urban children were pretty fast in adapting as far as this social interaction aspect is considered. Yeah. Of course, in any case, they have a leverage, they have an advantage over their rural counterparts in terms of online learning and online learning platforms. The worst hit, I would say, would be the rural people. They were deprived of learning and they were also deprived of the social interactions.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. I'll take one question from the audience. Prakash Reddy has a question for us. There is more focus these days on learning. COVID has shifted the focus from teaching to learning, and I guess that's what we are all talking about right now. From design perspective, do you have any ideas to design process for learning for different age groups? Yes, you want to take that question, or you want me to address that? Why don't you go first and then I...
Yeah, I think this is something that I echo with quite a lot. It's been a learning process. It's something which has become more learner centric than the teacher centric,
Teacher said.
and I think that's pretty important, right? I mean, until now, when we talk about teaching and learning resources in a higher education space, it was more to do with what kind of, what is the number of teachers that are available, what is the teacher to student ratio that is available, and things like that. But with technology, I think the reach can be much higher. I think one of the follow-up questions that Prakash sir has also mentioned is, why can't we leverage a few great teachers and bring the reach, to a larger audience?
Yeah.
Imagine a Nobel laureate teaching physics to every physics enthusiast across the world, and wouldn't that be a great thing, right? The per student cost would come down to nearly zero, instead of everyone flying to MITs and Harvards and talking about brain drains and environmental impact and all these other things. It is, I think, a different world when it comes to imagining how, a few teachers and a few uh, very talented people really spreading the ideas. But it also has a downside where few perspectives is going to create a lot of few perspectives are going to reign in at the end of the day, which is a problem with every social media network. Only populist ideas keeps getting bounced off. That is going to create a large bias across the whole population on a particular platform, and that's a completely different side of the problem. But the move from teacher to learner has definitely happened. But I don't think there is a form of learning that can happen without a teacher. That's something that I strongly believe in. You need to have some human interaction, and you need to have a person whom you are being in touch with. Even in corporates, right? Some of the best CEOs still have mentors. You call them by a different name, but essentially they are teachers in one's life. They might not solve all your problems. They might not be specifically sitting next to you and solving your use case, but they are more like giving you a framework of life on how do you solve a certain set of problems. So I think the change in learning and the change in teaching really evolves over time. It really evolves by age, right from a system of, if you go back to ancient India, there were gurukula. There are people like Dronacharya who used to select the best students and train them for a particular skill. And then you have people like the Panchatantra tales, where they used to pick up people who don't want to study anything, or who are not at all capable of learning anything, and you teach them something by a set of stories. So I think that's a completely different mindset if you think about it. We are talking on one side about places which are selection based, which keep a huge hurdle and say only people who are better than a certain level can get in. And then with that selection bias, you teach them something and they end up at good places in life. And on the other side of the problem, there are people who need much more attention from the teacher and a completely different pedagogical tools and processes to really inculcate that knowledge within them. So there is a component of inspiration that goes into the entire thing. I think one of the things both Sushila ma'am and Pratima, you were saying about access to knowledge is so rampant today. It's no longer you don't have to be somebody from an urban background. You don't have to go and get a library card to enter the hallowed buildings of great libraries. Now, if you just have a small, MI phone that would probably cost like 2,000 rupees to start accessing the whole internet, right? With Geo and everything, these are serious game changers. So that is how I look at the shift of learning and how the access to knowledge has happened. Now it's all about inspiration. And then you have tools that inspire you, right? You have, you hear stories. It's not, there are teachers for sure who inspire you, but at one point in time, there was a whole generation of Americans who wanted to go to space, who want to become astronauts because, the team basically landed on moon. And that became like a hugely inspirational story for the entire generation, right? I think inspiration is what people are looking for. And I think inspiration is one of the most important things that a student of today's world requires. There's so much of bombardment of knowledge. He has too much of choice. He either considers something as cool or boring. These are the only two tags he's able to label. So the real inspiration, and how do you bring that forward out of the whole clutter is a completely different challenge for today's education system.
Yeah, yes, I completely agree with you. And my 2 cents or my perspective is, learning gives us knowledge, whereas the inspiration makes us implement it. And, our teachers have always been that inspiration. So you can always go to Google, you can learn whatever you want, you can always go to, the edutech platforms, you can learn whatever you want. But I want to learn this would have come from some inspiration at some point. I mean, we are interested in something only because somebody inspired us to do that. And in most of our lives, it's the teachers who have done that. And especially in my case, I had great teachers who have inspired me. I mean, when I look back, yes, I was sometimes upset with them. I remember them making me kneel down. I remember them twisting my ears to do certain things. And probably I cursed them at that point. But then when I look back, I think it's because of them, we are all what we are. Right. And Prakash, to answer one of your questions, you said, why can't we leverage great teachers? And honestly, a great teacher sometimes is hidden in the woods, and you discover them and you discover them, right? It's not it's not, it's nothing negative. There are teachers who have become famous, and they have become famous because of various reasons, probably. It could be that they have been in the right place at the right time and they became visible to the world. But I know teachers, who made a huge impact in lots of lives. The other day, I was just reading something on social media where there was this teacher who was begging on the streets of the temple, and then her student recognized her and then did everything for her. And he claimed that it is because of her he is what he is today, right? And we cannot not say she's not a great teacher. She impacted lives, and the entire batch came together. They made sure her rest of the life is taken care of, right? So that means that they all value her contribution. So that's my take. It's my perspective. Ma'am, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I would like to add the question about leveraging a few great teachers. I think for me, it's simple probability, simple averages, if I can talk in terms of math, that we have a composition of teachers. Some of them certainly are great, irrespective of the experience. Some are great because of their experience. Now, earlier, in reality, we used to have certain issues of being able to place these good teachers in each and every class because of the timetable constraints, because of the working hour constraints. Now, this has given a good opportunity because of the scalability. It has given us a great opportunity that every student will have access to these experienced teachers and impactful teachers. I don't know what a good teacher is. For me, it is impactful teacher. All right. As a teacher, I would never accept the word good, bad, ugly for a teacher. But somebody who can really impact the students, as you rightly mentioned, there are a few teachers who are very impactful. So this is giving us, I think this is the flip side, this is a good side that we have seen, and at least I have personally seen, that it is giving opportunity to each and every child to have access to such teacher, which was not possible prior COVID. So that way we are able to leverage these experienced teachers, these teachers who can really impact the students, to the whole lot of students who are with us in the institutions, right? And I think the last phrase makes a lot of sense. I think the role of the teacher need to be redesigned. Yes, if Mr. Prakash Reddy has some inputs, I'm more willing to learn. We are struggling. I think we'll come out successful, triumphant one fine morning. We're trying.
Yeah, ma'am.
I think, Pratima, there's a portion where even I want to hear from you about how do you redesign for different age groups? So it says how it can be designed differently for different age group learners.
Yes. So one of my favorite topics these days is digital discipline, right? Um, it's a wonderful phrase by itself, and you know, the reason I brought up digital discipline is each child, right, at different ages, what they need is very, very different. Um, a kindergarten child necessarily might not want to learn on technology, or there might not be a need for them to learn on technology. It might be just that, you know, the hug and the kisses and the care of the teacher matter the most. So if the teacher comes online, you know, says, hello guys, I miss you, let's play a game, you know, interact, and, you know, and probably do a little bit more rather than focus, you know, the entire time on ABCD, maybe that will be great for them. Whereas when it comes to, you know, middle school, there should be a balance between, you know, personal care and as well as, you know, trying to teach. Right. So end of the day, what I mean, in other words, what I'm trying to tell, and the young adults, right? They pretend as if they don't need that care. They pretend as if they're adult enough, but you know, they want to learn a lot more, and they want to get into the world and experience earning employment. They're eagerly waiting. So what they need, their needs are quite different. So how does design help? One of the things that I generally focus when it comes to this is the personas. I mean, what are the needs of each of these, you know, children? If there is a kindergarten child and if they are on a smartphone and they have a login, probably I would limit their accessibility to anything on that phone for about less than an hour during this COVID times. And if it is non-COVID, I'd probably not even let them have phone at all, right? They have a lot more world to experience beyond the phone. When it comes to middle school, maybe along with the digital discipline from the school and school classes, they might need certain access to the external, you know, content. They might want to explore a little bit more. They don't have access to library, I mean, offline library, the physical libraries. So they might need access to digital libraries. And what are those libraries could be another thing. When it comes to a young adult, I think they have the freedom to explore, and I think it's their conscience that should drive them. So probably at some places as designers, we would encourage both children, parents, and teachers to get this discipline into their lives. So, Yash, that answers your question, or Prakash, I think, yeah. So.
Yeah, it kind of does. I see it, but I think technology is being, while it is, you cannot say no, I'm not going to use technology, right? At a certain point. So it's become like you are either, yeah, you have to inculcate into your routine of sorts. So there is no other way. And I mean, I get it. It has to be limited. Even if it's good, it cannot go beyond a certain hours in a day, or it cannot consume you entirely.
Yep, because one of the major problems, I know that this disorder has not yet become very popular out there, internet addiction, right? I mean, it hasn't been officially recognized as an addiction yet, but I foresee that happening pretty soon, especially with the COVID, right? There are enough rehab centers out there who are taking in people who are addicted to games, addicted to social media, are under high pressure, they're going through depression. There are enough people who are, you know, I mean, have suicidal thoughts because they think that their life is not as good as somebody else's, right? Or there are people who have lost jobs because of their addiction to games, and that has led them into depression and things like that. So there are enough rehabs out there. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to children, that's where I felt as a designer, and as a conscious designer, and also as a human, I felt like technology is not everything end of the day, right? Technology is an accelerator and enabler which is helping us do better in our lives. But let's say this pandemic made us converge towards technology, but let's say there's another pandemic because of which the internet gets destroyed. We still have to live. I mean, for me right now, my bread and butter is through technology. Yeah. There is a pandemic which will destroy this technology for me. I need to figure out my alternate source of income and livelihood. So, I don't want children at this age to think that technology is going to solve all of their problems. I want them to have some life skills. So that's where I am coming from as a human being as well as a designer.
Got it.
Yeah. He forcefully agreed, ma'am.
So the terms of engagement would be different from age group to age group.
Yeah.
To put it simply.
So Yesh, so since we are discussing designing, and maybe you might have some perspective on design, and I actually had this question for you, and I gave you the answer out as well now. So my question to you was supposed to be, edutech tools are increasing, at an exponential state in current situation. Everybody is talking about, an idea in edutech or coming up with a tool to help, all age groups. Forget about just the children or the students, right? I mean, even for senior citizens, they are trying to figure out what kind of edutech tools will help them, right? So according to you, what do you think is the game changer in this space? I definitely want the answer to be design, but no, it's okay. You can go with that.
So I think, so when iPhone got released, right? When Steve Jobs was on the stage and he was showing iPhone, I mean, that's one of the biggest marketing lessons and case studies that you hear across the whole MBA world. And he talks about how he is using the greatest stylus of the whole world. Until then, Nokia had this stylus and people would forget it. And it used to be like a huge mess. And he said, God has given us a stylus already. And that's our pointed, And then he's kind of completely relooked at the whole design component and broke a huge barrier. And, from there onwards, it has become de facto that your finger is the stylus and you can access with a machine using your finger. I think such kind of innovations have still not happened adequately in education. We are still, I feel that there is still an opportunity for 100 Steve Jobs to come in and change this whole landscape. Not just in India, but even globally, right? How do you do social interaction on a platform? How do you learn from each other? These are problems that I don't think we have solved yet. And there's still a lot of investment that needs to go in, a lot of ideas that needs to get implemented, tested, let enough people try it out, fail at it, and then start reinventing new things, innovate, start from the scratch. So with today's edtech tools, I think we are still scratching the surface. We are still looking at learning. We are still digitizing learning. We have not reimagined the whole learning process. Yes. Online is going to be a different game. It has to be far more, fundamentally, it has to be different in terms of how you are consuming information, how you are converting it into knowledge, how you are. So one of the things that we did is, peer-to-peer corrections. So in the past, when you have to take an exam, you write a subjective exam, and the teacher or the professor corrects it, sends it back, and it will take anywhere from, maybe 4 days if it's a small class and you have a lot of teaching assistants, or it might take as long as 1 week or 2 weeks for the exam results to be entered into an Excel sheet. And there's a lot of process that goes along with it. With what we have enabled, right? So today it takes less than a day for the corrections to happen, for the results to be collected, everything to happen. And more importantly, a student will have the opportunity of correcting another student's question paper or answer sheet. And that gives him a lot of insights on how a different perspective comes into play for the same question. That's an enablement that might not be possible on paper. I mean, I remember when I was in school, we used to have these slip tests, and we used to write something and exchange it with the student next to you, with your students, your bench mates or whatever you call them. And then we used to have agreements that you score me better and I'll score you. I'll do a favor and add a couple of marks here and there and try to get over with it, right? So these kind of interactions were, I fondly remember, and it's been you're learning also along the way. It's not just some kind of a small level corruption that you are running there, but it's also a way to learn from each other on what is the right answer, how did you think about it, what are the possible right answers for a particular question. And I think things like this, transforming the learning space, is what EduTech opens up. So in my opinion, what is a game changer? It's not really here yet. But one of the ideas that I strongly believe in is, something like an Alexa that is able to explain things, understand how the student is learning, how is it. It's a huge combination of, you're basically replacing a teacher with computer vision and a voice synthesizer and things like that, much more interactive than what we have today. But to be honest, even that is not enough, because you're still copying something and you're trying to create a Android version of what happens with a teacher, and that is never possible. You cannot do justice to it, right? You could put it's like solving the problem of writing in space with $1 billion project in the United States and Russians sending it with a pencil. So it cannot be that way. It has to be something far more meaningful. The word meaningful and impactful, like ma'am was also mentioning, right? I think the future is not pure edtech play. It is a very seamless integration of edtech and facilitators that will go together. It's more like using Blackboard and Chalkpiece today. You would not call Blackboard and Chalkpiece taking over learning, right? It's at the end of the day, Blackboard and Chalkpiece is just an enabler. You are using a set of tools to teach your class or teach a bunch of human beings in a much more interactive way. And I think technology will always stay that way. The scale and the numbers could change. The teacher could be in India and the student could be across on the other side of the planet. But I don't think there is a future there's a future where the teacher is being replaced by technology. I don't think that can ever happen.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Yash, on that particular. You brought up multiple points, and I completely agree with you on all of them. In relation to whatever you said, Prakash also had another question which said, don't you think traditional chalkboard is still the way to go when combined with technology to scale with LMS? And also, I think how LMS is playing a role during this pandemic, and how can it be designed differently for different age group learners, right? These are the couple of questions he had around the same context. For me, from my perspective, one of the things that I would like EduTech, owners or platforms to focus on, right now they're all focused on content. To generate content and to provide content and personalization again around the content. But having said that, along with content, if we could also enable transformation in those respective areas. Like, for example, when I watch a video or when I read something, I gain knowledge. But how are you enabling me to apply that knowledge practically, so that I as an individual, either I'm getting transformed in my specific area, or it is enabling me to do better. So I still see that gap in most of the LMS platforms and most of the EduTech platforms. They have enabled content. They have brought content to my fingertips. I'm able to go look for whatever I want. They have personalized it a lot, where you're progressively showing me from from a beginner level to intermediate to advanced level. So that that process is also has been included in terms of content management. But the transformation is an area that probably we could all focus on. So that's my take.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. There are two parts of any how a teacher teaches, right? My mom is a teacher, and ma'am also would probably resonate with what I'm trying to say. There is this context creation that I think great teachers do
Yeah.
extremely well, right?
Yeah.
I had teachers who start off with some very remote concept or a newspaper article or a joke, and courses like B.Ed and other teacher training programs, they actually teach how to be a teacher. But I think for some people it just comes naturally. They are better storytellers, right? And some people gain experience and then they are really trying to take that feedback and direct the class and capture the class's attention. So I think there are few platforms that are still trying to create a context before they get into the content part, right? But it's not been you haven't. Okay, so this is my point, right? So until a certain point, this is going I'm trying to challenge you in some way, but until a certain point, every great IAS officer would say their biggest inspiration has been their dad or their mom or their uncle, somebody from the family member. And then over time, it has become the teacher turned out to be the greatest inspiration. It's still not, we are still not there, but nobody says that this edtech platform has been the greatest inspiration for me to become a civil servant or for me to crack some other great exam or whatever it is. So I think it's just it's just a matter of time, in my opinion, that in terms of, again, it boils down to engagement, it boils down to economics. You want to make your student better and better because their word is going to win over everything else. You can be $1 billion company, but if your students don't call you, have you heard? I have not heard somebody saying Byju's has changed my life, right?
Yep.
But I think eventually we will all try to get there. Byju's would do that. Advisory is trying to do that. We are extremely focused on creating context. We bring in industry applications into the picture. There's this standard example that we talk about where if Elon Musk launches a rocket, and if you are an engineer and you just see it as news, then there is something wrong with the system, right? You have to create the context on how your engineering discipline, what topics that you have already learned help Elon Musk to make that launch happen. It could be navigation systems, it could be gyroscopes, it could be third law of Newton's third law. I mean, any of these things. I mean, bringing that context and attaching what is happening in real world and getting the right information at that right time is where I think learning actually happens at a much faster pace. And teachers are extremely great at doing it because at the end of the day, empathetic teachers, let me put it that way. There are teachers and then there are empathetic teachers. And if you're an empathetic teacher, it's very common to come into the classroom and say, hey, have you checked out this amazing video? And, you would forward it on the WhatsApp group. Or you would, back in the day, there were teachers who used to bring newspaper cuttings and say that there's an eclipse that is happening. How many of you are going to watch an eclipse? Why don't we talk about eclipse? And that context that is happening right around the world, and then you bring in a certain topic would bring a long lasting impression and impact on the student that I think is missing in most platforms today. Most platforms, when you say content, I understand you're talking about static content, and that's been working till now. Yeah. But people have become smart. People have understood that there is terabytes of content, and content is dime a dozen kind of a thing, right? So now they want more than that. So they want that context to be created before you serve them anything on a platform.
True. I think to add to what Yashwant was mentioning, content, I think what he said was right. It is static. So I don't foresee any problem in that, nor we are facing anything as of now. Context, I feel still manageable. I think from a teacher's perspective, what they essentially miss is if you go by Maslow's theory, a teacher doesn't thrive on money because all of you know that teaching is one of the not well-paid professions. People don't get into teaching for money. It's more of a self-actualization need than, the money needs. So if you go by that need, the self-actualization is at its zenith when a teacher can see that, what she has delivered, what she tried to facilitate to the student is received by them. The spark in the eye, the acknowledgement, if she could read that, I think that is a moment where I think she's paid for what she has, done in the classroom. I think that essential component is missing from the teacher's perspective. over the last 1 month, several instances, I find teachers, my own lecturers, professors coming and sitting across the table saying that, I wish there was some way where I can gauge the students. So probably it's just not digital. I think some amount of AI. I think maybe I'm sounding like a sci-fi, Schwarzenegger reading, having classes and finding people in different colors. So this thought came to my mind quite often in the last 1 month where, I wish there could be some goggles or something which the teacher can put on and then, probably gauge, or probably the system, the machine which the student is using, that interface could help the teacher understand, show him in pink color or blue color or yellow color to make her understand the level of acceptance, the level of understanding. All right. I think when he was mentioning Alexa, I was just thinking that, probably somebody else also is echoing what I'm trying to say, that it's just not technology. It's just not online digital platforms. I think some amount of AI must come to save the teachers to be better facilitators. However good you are, however impactful you are, it's leaving them confused in the middle of the class, whether to take a step forward or stay where they are or retreat and redo. It sounds very silly, but you believe me, it's the most difficult thing for a teacher, not understanding, not able to maneuver, whether you're going forward, whether you're going backward, and what is the moment, exact moment where you take a leap or you have to retreat. Now, with this kind of dilemma, I don't think even the best of the teachers would be, continue to be best. So I think something has to come up. I think most of your techies, you must be able to understand the problem I'm saying and come forward. I mean, this is a little away from digital, but let me share you one other experience. Somebody was mentioning exams. One of the nastiest things, that ever happens during the exams is the frisking of the children. I think all of us have gone through. I would definitely use the word nasty because I personally don't like anybody touching me, but it's become inevitable because of, the kind of cheating the children are resorting to. How I wished for the last decade that there is some kind of a scanner which can scan if there is a paper. There are metal detectors. Mm-hmm. Okay. So when I was heading the ED cell, there were several instances where I told the children that, find some person who's probably, rich in technology and get a machine who can detect if there is a paper. I mean, all the child brings in is a chit. I mean, this has been a very great desire for me for the last 10 years. It may not be rocket science, but somehow it didn't happen. So I think there are certain things will evolve, imbibing AI into it, which will help teachers to gain that kind of self-actualization they're asking for and give them that little boost they require to deliver better. If that is not inculcated, I think it's just watching a movie on the Netflix. The producer doesn't care whether you understood or not. The watcher doesn't care whether he understood or not, because I haven't paid a ticket for it, separately. So I think that thing must come into the picture to save the teachers and help them save the children.
So on the first problem, I can assure you, ma'am, my team is working on it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to, on behalf of the teaching community, I'm saying this, we are looking forward to, we need that kind of feedback.
Yeah.
Feedback is missing. And I don't think a teacher can survive long. They're already getting disheartened. I know teachers who used to run into the classes with such a cheer on their face. Now they're dragging their feet into the classrooms because all they got is to see a screen and talk, right. Not understanding who is on the other side, not understanding what's happening in their minds. So this profession doesn't work unless, if you're going to continue online, if it's a hybrid mode, I'm very thankful. I'm going to thank my stars. I'm going to thank God for this profession. But if it's not, I think AI must come into the picture to help them from this confusion.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very glad that, I was reluctant to use too many buzzwords like AI, machine learning, OpenCV and things like that. But I'm glad that you brought it up. But I completely empathize with you, and, teaching through a screen, there is nothing worse than that. You're basically seeing an inanimate computer or just a camera in some of these colleges with a green screen. Yeah. Completely non-cordial environment in which, teachers are being kind of forced.
And then a year back, Yashwant, if I found somebody talking to themselves, looking at the wall, I would have told he lost it. Today, I think all teachers lost it. All of us lost it.
Oh my God.
All
Okay.
right. Now, I keep joking to my young thing, you know, one fine day I'm going to talk to my micro oven in the kitchen because it doesn't matter which screen I'm looking at. How different is it?
Right.
All right. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
but
No,
yeah, I mean, there are, sorry, go ahead, Pratima.
no, I was just saying I totally get it,
Yeah.
ma'am. So it's
Yeah.
like, especially with the bandwidth issues and children
Yeah.
coming up with reasons not to switch on their camera. I mean, it's just getting, a little hard for the faculty to, yeah, it's,
And then there are privacy issues when you mentioned camera.
yeah,
It's a privacy issue, both for the teachers as well as the students.
yes.
It's not
yes.
easy.
It's not easy. It's
Yeah.
definitely not easy. Yeah. So when you're taking back the topic to AMM, one of the things that I know a lot of edutech platforms, like even I know that Yashwant is focusing on how to bring in AI and enable both teachers as well as students. And I think there are a lot of big companies working on it. There are startups working on this, trying to figure out. But I mean, we are not there yet. It's a long way to go. I know that there are certain platforms. In fact, one of my colleagues was mentioning the other day, her brother was taking an exam. I mean, and then I believe this particular platform, which is AI enabled, does detect the body movements,
Okay.
right? But not necessarily speech or eye movements. So there are two interesting topics that came out of it. One is he had to put a sticker on the door saying "Don't disturb," because even if somebody enters, it's our human reaction. We react and we tend to look the other side, and that's counted as cheating, and there's a streak on it. Or that was one interesting thing that was a takeaway from me in that conversation. The second interesting thing was the cheating, right? You were talking about scanning papers. Online we need to figure out how to detect the eye movement, and especially where the eye is heading, and even the sense of heat, probably because what she was saying is the screen is there, they're looking straight into the screen, but the mobile phone, they're leaving right like this on the screen. So the camera cannot detect the mobile, and they can type whatever they want on the mobile, get the answers and answer it, because most of these questions are multiple choice because of the current situation. So quite interesting conversation. So maybe I'm sure there are people working on speech recognition, especially when when a student is responding based on the tone of the voice or the frequency, whatever it is, you could kind of say that is that a confident answer or a confused answer, or what the hell is he doing? Is he relaxed, or he just was in a different world altogether and got back? Or AI helping us detect the eye or facial expressions also, for that matter. If the camera is on, we could even detect the faces. You will not be able to, in the small screen, you will not be able to look at the 60 or 80 people, but then if it somehow could prompt you that since a person is not, the facial expressions are not enthusiastic, then we could, you could actually bring them into the dialogue and conversation and make them part of the, make them active in the conversations and discussions.
And essentially in the classrooms, if you ever had a thorough interaction with the teacher, there is a unsaid norm in teaching where the teacher is trained to teach for the last child of the class. I think Mr. Yashwant would agree with me. You can talk to your mother. The success of the teacher lies in the fact that she's able to cater to the laggard of the class.
Yeah.
Now, the whole meaning of it is defeated.
Yeah.
So we're just delivering. This is like news reading on, any of those channels. Not understanding the impact we are creating, whereas the job essentially, the role essentially is to create an impact. So when somebody was mentioning, should we redefine a teacher? Yes, it's already redefined. We've become news readers now, as of now. And probably when people like Mr. Yashwant comes out with better solutions, or Pratima comes out with better solution, we'll be better news readers for some to come, and probably then start making an impact. Yeah.
It is very unfortunate for us to hear that from you. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. It is, it is,
saying,
it is.
But I think I strongly believe that it's a phase.
It's a
Now
phase.
yeah, it's
I
a
think
phase.
there
It's
are
a
lots
phase.
of voices, right? I mean, we never had such conversations. Everybody thought that Zoom would answer all the problems of teachers,
Yeah.
right?
No,
But
no, no.
now hearing all these things it clearly shows that we were force fitting a tool that is not built for education. It could
Yes,
probably
yes.
be used for corporates discussing about
It's a
what is
meeting,
happening at a
meeting.
client side
Yes.
when you are in US. But when you're talking about a formative at a formative age, you're talking about students and impacting their whole trajectory of lives, then the technology of today is seriously handicapped. You still require a lot of people to go in and put in their brains and actually solve these problems.
It's actually, in a way, I think we have come halfway through, if I could say that. See, for example, when you were mentioning this, it just struck me that we, in our college or on a platform known as Code Tantra, this is not a meeting room app like Zoom. It's built for classrooms. But then in that, we have an exam format, which essentially has to be in the MCQs, which is not, a normal format which we use in the classroom mode. Now, the teachers are not comfortable. The children are outsmarting teachers any day. It takes just a second for the smartest of the kids to put it on their WhatsApp group what the worst answer is.
Yeah.
So all of them are coming out and topping class.
Yep.
So these are certain things which we have been interacting. I mean, all of us in different institutions, not just in the institution that I'm working with, we're going back to them, running with them with a lot of problems at a scale in which they cannot give solutions.
Correct.
Right?
So,
but
yeah,
at least
Yeah,
Sorry,
I mean, absolutely. So we at Advisely, we were able to solve some of them.
Yeah.
We could clearly see this turn happening, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we are getting valuable feedback that we never could get. People are seriously looking at technology, they're using it, and you, ma'am, or people like you are voicing out saying this is not good enough for us. This is not good enough for a classroom. This might work in HP, it could work in Microsoft. But when it comes to a classroom, when it comes to somewhere where you have 60 students on the other side waiting for you to teach them something, the current processes is clearly not working and we need better tech. I mean, maybe pre-COVID, I could sell a software, I could work on it for 6 months and come and say, this is the greatest edtech platform and you have to take it, pay X amount of money. But today, teachers are demanding much more. They start asking questions like, can you solve these 3 questions? And if you can, then you are in the market, otherwise you are not. It has clearly given that boost for innovation, right? Because now the feedback is coming stronger. And I think more and more platforms, Code Tantra, Advisely, many platforms have started investing heavily in it. And I think it's a good place where that the change or the tectonic shift is going to be seen, hopefully. And it's not like serious innovations that we are talking about yet. There are still problems that are solved in other spaces. It just were not innovated or were not brought into a classroom yet. But I think it is definitely going to happen, and I'm pretty optimistic. I have to. Right?
We all have to be. We all have to be.
Yeah. In that context, yes, apart from only education sector, I think everybody will benefit out of it, including corporates, right? Because one of the ways we as humans express is through our body language. Words come later, and most of us we tend to express through our facial expressions or our body. So, and when you are talking to somebody or when you are in a room with the same person, you can gauge what's happening. They could speak something, but actually something else could be happening in their mind, right? And you can gauge that. Whereas online, it is so hard. You have to rely on what they're speaking rather than actually, trying to figure out what the hell is happening in their minds. So,
Pratima, students have a batch of students who are with us are having their project Viva end of this week. So we had an online session to train them, the online etiquette. We had mock Viva. Usually we have a mock Viva to train them because university representatives would come and sit. I laughed aloud when I told the students that, look, normally we say, look into the eye. We say, look into the camera when you speak. So I think the whole verbatim, the whole context has changed.
Yeah.
Huh? So now normally we teach, you know, if you pull the chair back, put the chair back, you know, and if you open the door, close the door. Now things have changed. We are teaching different set of instruction to the students, and it's become an everyday learning for them, for us.
So we have just 7 more minutes. Maybe we can open up the platform for the participants to ask questions. So Amit, would you?
So, guys, now we can take Q&As. So if anyone has any question, please raise your hand and we can take it with the panel. And going forward, like I'll take the first question. I'll pitch in the first question. Like, listening to all the stories, I remember one of my, 10th standard tutorial classes teachers. Like, he used to teach Marathi subject, and there was a particular lesson, and that teacher was famous throughout all the branches for teaching that particular lesson in a particular manner. Like, it was a story, and the way when he came to our batch, he taught us, we are a batch of around 30-35 people, like students sitting in, all the lights are shut, no one is talking, and the way he was teaching, like, explaining every sentence, like he was establishing a scene for us and right in front of us. And in that moment, when you say it's not an individual person, like when you have 30 people in, and those all people are reacting to something, there's a group dynamics that is generated. And that is something that, we, as all of you mentioned, that in the screen to screen communication, that is something that is clearly missing in. Then we have, if we come to current scenarios right now, as Soumya had, asked, saying that, 5G technology is coming in, and 6G is already in development phase. And so with this, we have platforms with mixed reality, AR, VR, that are going to be more adaptable, right? But in a country like India, where, we still have some of the rural areas which still are having difficulty getting electricity. And, how do we, it's not just a one branch like design or ed tech or education. It's a collective problem to solve, to get this conversation up ahead. So how do we, it's a national level problem, I could say.
It's actually a global problem, Amit.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, if Yash, ma'am, one of you want to take it before?
Yeah, should I? I may not be able to completely answer his question for lack of technical knowledge on a couple of things, but from a teacher's perspective, I could say that, India is the second largest e-learning platform today, next only to the US. Yeah. So that's a good thing. But as you rightly mentioned, the digital divide must be kept in mind. Now, of course, UNESCO says about 32 crore children are in education, but that is their official figure. But realistically speaking, about 37 crore citizens of this country who are born into this country are into education today. We do not speak so much. It's a very passive industry, but it's a huge industry. And I think everybody like Mr. Yashwant and Pratima, who are in the edu tech, I think this is your gold mine today. I think we have a long way to go, but we will probably come halfway through, we'll find, we make certain adjustments, and I think all of us will settle comfortably. It's a huge market. It's a huge, huge market. And I wish, of course, I know when I say this, I also understand that, probably when I speak to our vendor, there are 300 queries from 60 teachers, week on week. So I feel, are we putting these guys in a rush?
Yeah.
but I think we are left with no alternative. All right. So it's a challenge to them, it's a challenge to us. But I think to answer his question, to decrease the digital divide, I think open source digital learning solutions will help to a great extent. Of course, internet connectivity, electricity connectivity is not something for people like you and me in the private sector to answer for. But I think the new education policy must take care of it because they have incorporated the digital learning also into it. So I hope it may take some time. Maybe I'm looking at something like 4 to 5 years for us to get connected that way. The infrastructural issues I cannot vouch upon. But I think by the time the infrastructural issues are taken care by the education ministry, I think open source digital learning is one solution and learning management softwares can be another solution. Cost-effective ways, all right? And just to give you a perspective, podcasts are not very popular with youngsters in India. I mean, it could be any other topic, but not for academics, unlike in the US. Yeah. Of late, in the last 3 months, I found a lot of students asking for podcasts. There are a lot of professors who have switched to podcasts, and students are feeling quite comfortable. I think that's one thing which needs to be explored in India, where I find a lot of sustainable business opportunity. All right, compared to the video lessons. So I think some solution like this, I mean, we're just trying whether podcasts work or not, at least in the institution that I'm working for, we're switching slowly to podcasts, which gives them the comfort of listening to them as and when. I remember one of the panelists speaking about digital libraries. Yeah. This could be a part of that. We're working on it. This should really help. The technical issues, I think Yashwant would be a better person to answer.
So I think things like mixed reality, right? While we all imagine that they are very advanced in their technology realm, they are not really as advanced as you would want them to. Mm-hmm. And you know, again, infrastructure constraints, we still are struggling with. I mean, honestly, if there's a power cut, and touch wood, it doesn't happen, but if there's a power cut, I'm lost. I'm completely out of this discussion. And you can never predict a power cut in India. But there are
internet outage.
Internet outage is another big issue. I have one of my very close friends. She's in Jammu. And because of the abrogation of Article 370, she doesn't have anything beyond 2G. And the government keeps disconnecting, internet broadband services at their whim and fancy. So there are very, very fundamental issues. And we are talking about urban India here. Jammu is itself a city and we are all in Hyderabad. So we are still not crossed over those fundamental problems of having reliable power, reliable internet connectivity. Right. And we are talking about mixed reality and bringing in 5G and things like that. While there is definitely going to be acceleration, I'm not 100% sure that it will happen very fast. There are still private players. You have Jio and these people who are accelerating these processes. So it might be a thing very soon, sooner than we imagine it. But the state of mixed reality and all these things, I think, is going to create more divide. Right, the small set of people who have access to these expensive technologies will be much ahead of the race than the rest of them, and it's going to keep increasing education inequality, access inequality as we keep going forward. So I feel that there's some level of intervention that needs to happen, which actually kind of restricts how these things happen. It cannot be accelerated in only one segment. While in terms of the economics, it is how it generally happens. You have the really cutting edge technology going into the hands of very rich people, be it, cell phones were a thing which were only meant for a select few in our generation, right? We have seen it. In 90s, somebody having a cell phone was considered like a big thing. Today, everyone has access to a smartphone. There is no difference. That's become an equalizer. So I think it's a matter of time, but at the same time, we come from humans have developed from the first storytellers were probably sitting around a fireplace in front of their cave, listening to something that they have imagined, right? Or they must have seen somewhere, or they came up with a story, and just like what Amit was narrating, his amazing Marathi professor or teacher would give him a scene. And these kind of things started, and the whole experience of communal learning, communal watching. There is an element of that which draws us to a cinema theater to watch a film, right? Even though you have Netflix, you have a bunch of other things, you would still want to go around in a theater and laugh together, shout together, get scared together, and things like this. I think are very fundamental to human growth. You cannot say that we will all stay in bubbles and then individually we'll be able to learn things together. It's going to be entirely different. But having said that, more than mixed reality, right? Handheld, wearable devices, your watches and things like these, which can really give you feedback on how your community is going to look together, or they're watching together a film online, but you would still get a sense of what the other people are feeling about it through haptic feedback, with a bunch of other things. Looking at how your temperature, heartbeat, blood pressure, these things are varying, you could give them a feedback on how interesting something is turning out to be, how scared the person is. So I think as humans, will figure out a way to have that experience as we keep going forward. But at the same time, it shouldn't happen in a way where there is more people on the margins that are being left behind, and that creates a huge difference or a divide, especially in a country like ours.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a
change of perspective has become very, very difficult. Let me give you a small input here. Essentially in India, especially with the children who are, high school or middle school, all these interfaces that we're talking of, let it be a smartphone or a laptop or a TV, any screen that they would watch, essentially are understood by them in their subconscious as mediums of entertainment. This, I interacted with a lot of parents who started expressing this, that they are not taking the screen time seriously. It took me for a while for them to make them understand that, look, there is a transition required from the subconscious mind of the child, that, look, it is no longer an entertainment interface for me, it is an educational interface. So I think we lost precious 5-6 months in this whole process. I think slowly, gradually, the children are getting into their brains that, look, there is some learning which is happening in the screen. Otherwise, essentially, irrespective of the age, it can be my grandfather, it can be your mother, it can be a child. All these screens are entertainment interfaces, barring those in the tech industry.
Right.
For you, it's like bread and butter. That's a different ball game altogether. So I think the transition is going to take a long, long time. I think, for a child who's, let's say, 16 now, from the age probably 5, this generation has touched the screens in different formats. So for him, from the age 5 to 16, for 11 long years, having understood something as a tool for entertainment and switching now to another learning platform is not so easy.
Agreed.
So the fun element keep coming in. I mean, it creeps in. I mean, however you train them, it takes a long time for us to make that change in the psyche of the student.
That's very true, ma'am. That's one of the reasons why the attention span, everybody talks about attention span, right?
This is why we've been implementing the podcasts, and I think it's working well. Parents are happy because the screen time is reduced.
Yeah.
Very interesting insight, ma'am. Yeah.
Actually, I know a few people who maintain 2 different laptops, one for work and one for entertainment. Just that the mood is set. It's correct. As simple as our clothes, right? When we go to work, the clothes that we wear put us into that formal situation, or our mindset, it changes our mindset. And whereas when we change into our night clothes, we are more relaxed, and it's a different mindset altogether. So I think, right, like you rightly pointed out, the devices have always been sources of entertainment for these children. And the way you see, in fact, my children also, the way they sit, they put up their legs up, hands somewhere. It would not be the body language that they would have had in a class. And all this seemed to be, there's a lot of change because of the COVID. But Amit, like ma'am pointed out, or Yash pointed out, every infrastructure will need money, and at some point, it's when something is recognized as a need, by default we will all start investing into it. If you observe, right, smartphone was never a need. in early 2000 or 90s. And now pretty much anybody and everybody, even somebody who is working on daily wages, sees smartphone as a need rather than as a luxury, because they need access to entertainment, they need access to different apps probably on their thing. So at some point, as the technology is converging towards the physical world, I'm optimistic that the government policies our perspective about technology and all this will change, and probably it will become a need more than a want. So we will, it's
until of late, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Until of late, all of us must have probably heard our social teachers talking about income inequalities in India. Yes. I think that's one lesson all of us invariably would have heard 1,000 times from a very religious social teacher. Going forward, the social teachers would be talking about internet inequalities.
Yeah, digital inequality, internet.
No longer about income inequalities. Yes. It's digital or, income, instead of income, it's become internet inequalities today.
Yeah.
So I think, anyway, I think we will overcome. The human race is very resilient. So we will.
So it's Amit, it's 8:40.
Yeah. So
we should
so if anyone has any question, please pitch in. Like, if with the great conversation that was going on, we had it's a lot of things to take in, to digest. Like, it's not something, the solution that we can come up with in one day, but it's something that we need to take care of. And sustainable employment that we are looking at, sustainable employment, that is something future that can only take place when we take care of the basics of it, like proper education. And in the current scenario that we are all facing different changes equally, this becomes much more prominent and important to take care of, I think. As a community, I think we'll be coming up with new solutions.
Yeah, and socially responsible solutions.
Yep.
Socially responsible.
Yes, ma'am, socially responsible. And both of you, in fact, are working on the next gen. And in your own ways, right? One from the technology perspective, one from teaching perspective. It's interesting. End of the day, when somebody asks me why isn't education free in India, it's a hard question, and only the government can answer that maybe. But from my perspective, we have always taught that education is the right? Just like freedom. All of us have to be educated. And like you pointed out, if somebody doesn't want to be educated, so be it.
That's fine.
Yeah,
absolutely
totally
fine. There is a place for everyone in the world.
Yes. So it was, I'm so happy to be on the panel with both of you, and the perspectives that you have brought out, it's quite an interesting 1.5 hours or more, a little more than that. But I learned a lot. You have opened my eyes in different ways. A lot to think on and contemplate and reflect upon. Maybe, this panel probably might have added enough value to the rest of the folks as well. And yes, ma'am, so hopefully this has given you a little more insights into what other side of the spectrum is thinking also. So thank you so much. It's late in the night, and it was an amazing conversation. So I think I'm more energized than before.
It's been a pleasure, Pratima. Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me. I think I've learned a lot from Sushila, ma'am. I think some of the insights she was sharing,
me too.
And of course, Pratima. But I really want to hear from some of the folks that have joined in as our audience. on what they think about our conversation. If there's anything else that they wanted to hear when they started off, and how did it add value to them.
So Amit, if you could unmute everybody, so we could they could add in some of their comments as well.
Yeah, Pratima. So I have changed the setting now. People can guys, you can go ahead and ask your questions directly.
Prakash, you seem to be very active with your questions. Maybe you could, anything else that we could have covered, or you want a little more insights on anything? Maybe you could start it and then.
Good evening, folks. It was a great listening to you. I was actually an accidental, participant. I just was browsing through in the morning, and I found that there was some session going on. I just said, why not? And then I just, I think I gate crashed into your meeting. But then I'm an enthusiast, actually. I'm an enthusiast and trying to solve some of the today's problem, particularly dealing with learning and education, and how technology can help to solve some of these problems. And I'm a great fan of teachers, how they teach and how people learn. And in fact, one of the questions I put was, if there's anything, it's a quiz from my side. If there's anything, any term that we can invent as Devami designers for a word which can be a word for learning, because the people talk about pedagogy, but then why can't we have a word today for a process of learning? I think somebody needs to invent a word, and people don't seem to be using, because children are learning and children don't have a sense to invent a word, because teachers invent words and they put it, but then what about a child or somebody who's learning? So, this is the only thing, but it was really a great, great entertainment rather for me, because to also educate myself and during these crucial evening hours. And I think it will be something to relish and think about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prakash. Anybody else has any questions or any inputs, feedback?
Hi, my name is Barna and I'm from Bangladesh. Actually, this whole conversation was very stimulating for me. I have actually studied under the Indian curriculum, under the CBSE curriculum. I'm currently a professional, a marketing professional. So obviously the discussions which ma'am had and Mr. Yashwant had, it reminded me of my school days, because it was all Indian teachers, and the whole experience has been very nostalgic for me. So I just want to ask the forum. We know that every person learns in they have a different style of learning, because for example, I'm a very visual person. So podcasts don't work for me. I lose attention. I can't really focus as a marketing professional. Obviously I'm in my mid-career, so I'm also in the process of learning new things, developing new skills as the world moves into a more digital or digitally led, skill set. So I'm just wanting to hear from ma'am and Mr. Tudmila whether there are ways on how we can overcome this. Because for me, even when I'm doing videos, the level of concentration that I need in order to do that, I seem to lose track. And definitely when I'm learning and putting my efforts, I really want to make sure that, I imbibe or absorb, like ma'am was saying, there's no feedback mechanism. So it's all upon the learner to make the best use of whatever is in front of them. So just trying to understand that, how do you actually reach out to different learning styles, like auditory, or maybe people who are more visual, or some people are more into, writing things down rather than just listening and watching. So if from the design perspective, are there things that, the users can use? And if there's any thoughts around this? Thank you.
I'll take this. It's more teacher-centric.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Sure. She brought out very beautifully. When I said podcast, I was not indicating that we are completely switching into the podcast. There are 2-3 important reasons. Since the platform had a limited time, I really didn't want to get into these different needs of a student, which she rightly pointed out. So there are some students who need a visual presentation. Probably, a platform where a screen is used will be helpful for them, where we have audio recordings as well as video recordings. It's for the student to pick up from the library as to which one he wants to use. I think that answers her query, essentially. And secondly, there is one problem with the screens as to why we are thinking more on terms of podcast rather than presenting something on the screen. The health hazards which can be created in terms of, in school education, probably it's restricted to 2 hours, 3 hours of viewing. But in higher education, considering the application-oriented education, I think the students are forced to be before the screens on an average between 6 to 8 hours a day. It's like working for a company, So there are concerns raised by the parents about such hours of spending time before the screens. And they're worried about the damage to the eye. They're worried about the radiation issues. I mean, these are all not scientifically, there are studies, but at least the parents to a certain extent are not very informed about the hazards, whether it is hazardous or not hazardous. There is a mixed reaction about parents. More of fears than their curiosity to find out if it's really something to be feared about. So keeping these in mind and not understanding a clear directive as to whether we are going to use them forever or it's a temporary phase or it's going to be lasting a little more time, a longer time. So not understanding the short run and the long run of it. We thought that at least to appease the parents and to cater to the students who are more acquainted with listening skill than using their eye, for that set of students, we thought podcasts are working. Third, where there are working parents and limited interfaces at home. There are a lot of parents who are working parents working from home where the computers and machines are used by them during the working hours. So at least 1/3 of the students, either at the school level, middle school, upper middle, or higher education, have concerns about watching these from the mobiles. So most of them feel that, watching them on or listening to a lesson on the laptops and computers would be a far better alternative than mobiles. I'm not a technical person to vouch the damage created by watching the screens on the mobiles, but I'm sure it does. As a mother, I'm saying this. So to overcome this, probably recordings, audio lessons when the teacher is speaking or taking the class in the form of either podcasts or audio recordings. And even if it's a visual recording, which the student would be able to play when the interfaces at home are relatively accessible to them is one reason. And thirdly, we all know that at the time of examinations, we don't know for how long we're going to run this. Again, I'm going back to the short and the long-term implications. So this digital library probably helped the student. All of us know what revision classes are. Once the syllabi is over, there were teachers who would help us with the problems that were unsolved by us, assignments which could not be handled. Now we foresee that we are not going to touch any smoother into that phase. So probably these recordings, whether it's an audio recording or a visual recording, would definitely help the student to revisit the lecture given by a professor in the classroom or a teacher in the classroom. So these are 1 or 2 important reasons why we are trying. I'm consciously using the word trying. I'm not saying that one thing works well. I don't think anybody ever would in the next 6 months, at least from the teaching community. We're still trying various modes. And as she rightly pointed out, I think there is an audience for each of those methods that we are adapting. Yeah, I think that answers the query.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
So if anyone has any questions, we are almost out of time now. So, if there's no question, I would like to thank, all the panelists like Pratima, Sushila ma'am, Yashwant to bring in this, mind-blowing perspectives. And it's something that we would surely like to share with the whole community, and this actually, completely justifies the agenda that we had today. Even the IXDD, the whole point of them establishing this events, that, to learn from others, to gain insights what others are doing, and then coming up with solutions, for that. that's something that we have to come up with now. But yeah, thank you so much, guys, for giving like all of your time and giving this insight. And thank you for all the participants to pitch in and listen to this. Hope it was valuable. So with this, I'd say good night. Stay safe. Thank you so much.
Amit, I would like to personally thank Pratima and Yashwant. It's been an evening well spent for me. Thank you so much. It's very heartening to know that, there is another side. Of course, for me, technology is another side because we are a chalk and talk kind of a conventional professional. So it's very heartening to see that there is another FISE which is thinking of us, which is trying to make accommodations for us, which is trying to make the process a little more smoother for us. Thank you on behalf of the teaching community. And I would also like to use this opportunity to thank Aparna, who has invited me onto this platform. It's certainly an evening well spent for me. Thank you, Aparna. Thank you, Pratima, Yashwant, and Amit.
Thanks a lot.
And the audience too for being such a great audience.